You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest Commissioner Larry Suffredin, who is a Democrat. He's a Democrat from Evanston. And more importantly, he's here because he would like to be your state's attorney. If you're watching this in Cook County, he would like to be the state's attorney of Cook County. He is running in a tough Democratic primary in which he's got 6 opponents. If you're watching this show regularly, you'll be seeing him. You'll be seeing Larry Suffredin. You have or will be seeing Alderman Howard Brookins, perhaps Alderman Allen, perhaps Smilin, perhaps, who am I leaving out?
Alvarez, Harris, and Brewer.
All right, so quite a crowd. He'd like to be, what do you call that, the top law enforcement officer?
It is of the county, and since our county is a little bit like a state, and we'd be the 17th largest state if we were a state, it's like being the Attorney General of the 17th largest state.
All right, now Commissioner Suffredin, as we say, is 35 years as a lawyer, assistant public defender for a few years, some criminal defense in private practice, 136 jury trials, 2 verdicts, state appellate courts he's practiced in, federal appellate courts, the state Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. He's been a partner at Shefsky and Freilich for the last 5 years or so. He has been a Cook County Commissioner since December of 2002, so he was just reelected to his 2nd term. He serves on the Cook County Board Litigation Committee and other committees there. He's been known, I've called him as a part of others as a part of the Gang of 4. That has been Forrest Claypool, Mike Quigley, Tony Perica, and of course Larry Suffredin, although sometimes maybe we're substituting for Mike Quigley, or is he still a part of it?
Oh, Mike Quigley is clearly the leader of the reform movement.
He started it, yeah. Although he kind of got a little close.
I think
to
everybody fades in and out of some of these things. Perica has been the least consistent, I think,
But the main thing was he was part of the Gang of 4. When then they would get 4 of the Republicans, they'd have a Gang of 8. Then they get Erling Collins successfully blocked tax increases by then Cook County President
first
John
time it had ever
Stroger.
been done.
Then Todd Stroger's sort of last time around. We'll get to that. Major tax increases coming up. He does a lot of government relations, administrative law, litigation. He is a registered lobbyist in Springfield, lifelong resident of Chicagoland, and Loyola University Chicago undergrad, and Georgetown Law School, and in the U.S. Air Force.
I was in the Air Force, yes.
Reserves for 2 years, lives in Evanston with his wife, and she has 2 grown kids. But as you say, the main thing, he's running for state's attorney of Cook County. He says he's running on a platform of independence, experience, and judgment. We'll talk about that, and you folks will be the judge. He, as we said, would like to be the state's attorney of Cook County. So let me ask you, Larry Suffredin, to start it off. Commissioner Larry Suffredin, did Mayor Daley do the right thing about the torture issue, first when he was state's attorney of Cook County and now as mayor? Has he always done the right thing, or is he part of the problem as opposed to the solution?
Well, I know a lot about the Burge case because I tried a Burge case in 1974, filed the motion to suppress, tried to stop it.
And the Burge case, when you say one of the Burge cases,
this is Lieutenant Burge.
Detective John Burge?
He was a lieutenant who was the head of a unit that handled a lot of homicide cases and seemed to beat confessions on a regular basis.
What was that area they were in, Area 2?
Area 2, and
he'd beat what?
He'd beat a lot of confessions, beat people up.
He beat them up to get confessions and tortured them.
And tortured them, yes. That's what the beatings were all about.
And they were pretty loud about it. Obviously, an accused, a defendant would start screaming, and outside the door would be possibly an assistant state's attorney.
And the confessions would often be taken by state's attorneys.
So they knew what was going on.
I think that you asked the question.
They knew what was going on?
Well, they knew something was going on. They should have been asking questions.
Okay.
One of the things.
Let's get to Daley. What did Daley know? What did he know, and when did he know?
Well, I don't know what the state's attorney knew at the time. I think that his assistant certainly let us down. And I don't know what the state's attorney did, because that hasn't come out in any of the.
Well, he got a letter. He got a letter from Brezek, right? The superintendent at some point. You know about that.
He got a letter from Brezek, and we don't know.
And he was state's attorney Daley at that time.
He was the state's attorney. If I get a letter from the police superintendent who says to me there's a problem in my police department, I'm going to do something about it. I can't tell you what the state's attorney did or didn't do because it did not come out in the specials.
Didn't come out as to what he did? You had a special prosecutor. Who was that?
Special prosecutor,
Egan?
Judge Egan and Bob Boyle.
And they forgot to ask?
No, I don't know what they did. Their report left it's a gap in the report. That's one of the reasons that Commissioner Collins and I have asked the United States Attorney to take all the files of the special prosecutor, to look at them and see if there is not, under federal civil rights law, some crimes that can't be charged that can be charged at this point against Lieutenant Burge and their men, and maybe higher up into the State's Attorney's office. But I can't tell you what Mayor Daley did as State's Attorney. Right now, the mayor's position seems to be that the city has no choice but to defend cases against the city and against Lieutenant Burge. I tend to agree with Alderman Preckwinkle and others that that should not be the stance of the city, that they should be more aggressive in trying to figure out what Burge did. If he exceeded his authority, the city should not be liable for his actions. And I would hope that
cut him loose, is that what they should do?
He should be on his own. And I think that they ought to challenge his pension. Because if his pension is based upon a fraudulent premise that he was a good and faithful government employee, then he shouldn't be entitled to it if he wasn't a good and faithful government employee.
But the report that you're talking about went to whom? The Cook County Board?
Well, no. It was presented to the chief judge. Remember, here's what happened.
Chief judge of?
Of the criminal division, Paul Beeble.
Of
the Circuit Court of Cook County.
Circuit Court of Cook
But
County.
that's a state court. Remember, what happened here is that a number of plaintiffs in federal lawsuits against the city of Chicago and against Burge felt that there was no investigation going on, and they felt that State's Attorney Devine was conflicted because his prior law firm had defended Lieutenant Burge.
His prior law firm being
Phelan, Pope and John, or Pope and John at that point. And so they went and asked Paul Beeble to appoint a special state's attorney. This is different than the special assistant state's attorney. This is to give somebody the full power of the state's attorney for a specific purpose. And he appointed retired appellate court judge Ed Egan and Robert Boyle, who had been the first deputy state's attorney somewhere in the probably the early 70s or the late 60s. And the two of them undertook an extensive research. We paid around $9 or $10 million.
When you say we, who do
the
you?
county board, because unfortunately
Cook
the way
County
the laws
Board,
are
of which
set
you
up,
are a member.
I'm a member of it, but we have no discretion here. This is one of the problems. It's a state court, but when they order special expenses, they have to be paid by the county in which the expenses are
And you have to
incurred.
approve as a board those
Well,
expenses.
these expenses come to us as court orders, and so Judge Beeble had been ordering us to make the payments. Now, Commissioner Collins and I, about a month and a half, well, July 14th, we cut off payments. We were threatened with contempt of court because we had cut off the payments. We passed a resolution saying we were tired, we weren't going to pay
We don't want to
anymore.
get too much detail, but okay, so you did that, but you as a board and you as a commissioner on the board, you are approving these as with the qualifications given the expenses, but you don't get to see the report?
Well, we got a copy of the public part of the report. We've seen that.
What
Everybody
about
has seen
what's
that.
the non-public? Who gets the non-public part of the
Well,
report?
that's why we've got a commitment
But
now
who
that all
gets
that
it?
goes
Somebody's
to
gotta
the
get-
U.S. Attorney.
No, but other than the U.S. Attorney, who gets it? These guys did a report. Somebody had to
Well,
see it.
the report is out in public. It's a number
The
of
public
volumes.
part of it.
Public part is all
But is
out.
there a non-public portion of the report?
There is records that are confidential.
So the public portion of the report
It's
has
totally
nothing,
out.
and has nothing about Mayor Daley as to what he did or didn't do. Is that what you're telling me?
The report does not come to any conclusion as to the mayor being either culpable or not culpable for the actions.
Shouldn't they have come to that? He was the state's attorney at the time. How can you do a report without
Look,
doing it?
I didn't do the report. I only read it.
Have you been critical of them for the
Oh,
doing that?
absolutely. We
Okay.
filed resolutions.
Aside from the expenses, just in terms of not coming to a conclusion.
Yeah, I think that for the amount of money that we spent, that they should have done things. I also think that there's a professor at DePaul, Leonard Cavise, who believes that they're wrong on their conclusion on the statute of limitation. I think there could have been more work done. That's why we decided that we needed to get all this material to the U.S.
So
Attorney.
you referred it to the U.S. Attorney voluntarily.
And the U.S. Attorney has now said that they have opened a file and that they will look at it.
So there may
they have a
be-
lot more latitude on the questions of like this because of civil rights laws.
Could be a conspiracy to cover up the torture, right?
Could be an ongoing conspiracy for all
Could
we
be
know.
ongoing that could involve the mayor then and could involve him now.
I don't know. See, I don't know what the mayor
Could
knew or
that,
didn't.
no, but could that be?
I
If
think
you're-
anybody who
if
was
you're
in the
looking at
state's attorney's
possibilities.
office, anybody who was in the police department at the time, could be the subject of that investigation.
Would that include state's then first assistant Dick Devine, who was the first
He
assistant
was at
to
some
to
part
Mayor
of it,
Daley,
and
to
other
State's Attorney
first
Daley?
assistants who were there. Yes,
Kunkel, was he there at that time?
Kunkel would have been there at some part of it, I presume.
All right, so you, police and the assistant state's attorney, too close at that time?
Well, and they're still
close?
too close. I mean, we have a real problem and a dilemma right now. There's no confidence in our communities about police action. And I talk about our community being the 150 different and distinct communities that are within the city of Chicago and suburban Cook. I think people are very concerned that the police departments are not doing what they're supposed to, and the state's attorney's office is absolutely.
Are they out of control? Are the Chicago police out of control?
I think some of the Chicago police are out of control, and I think what we have to do is redefine the role of the police department and the role of the state's attorney.
How many bad cops do you need before you conclude there's a problem?
Well, I don't know. It's a question of a number. It's
But
a question. The moment there's one, there's a problem.
Well, John Burge, but there are others. The
John
special
Burge has
ops.
been retired a long time.
Right, the special
now
ops.
you've got special ops. You've got people that are just so aggressive.
Then you got
on
people
stuff.
beating up on barmaids, whether they're on duty at the time. Then you have people and the policemen going after individuals in a bar.
But Jeff,
then you have people waving off the police who come to investigate. How many do you need to decide there's a problem?
Jeff, you cannot ignore that 99.9% of the police officers in any department are decent people fighting to do what's right. We're dealing with a very small percentage in the overall number of police officers.
Is it 600? Is that the problem?
I don't know what the number
You've
is.
heard of this list of you've heard about the list that people can't
Again,
get access
I'm with
to names?
Alderman Tony Preckwinkle on trying to get that list.
How many police are on that list?
I have no idea because they won't release the list.
I thought they would tell you that the number is about 600, isn't it?
Well, I've not seen the list. We're trying to get a copy of
What
the
is that list? What does it tell?
That list should tell us the officers where there have been continuous problems with them in terms of excessive force.
In terms of allegations
one of the
of
things that's got
police
to happen.
brutality?
See, I don't believe we need inspector generals and these other things in these governments if the state's attorney's office is doing its job. The state's attorney is meant by the Constitution of Illinois to be the inspector general. It's the group that's supposed to protect us from this kind of, and I think we have a problem.
It has not been doing its job.
It has not been doing that.
Dick Devine has not been doing his job.
What we
Is that
have
what
to
you're telling
do,
me?
I'm telling you, the state's attorney's office has not been doing it. As the state's attorney, this needs to be redefined.
Well, then it's
we
him.
we
It is
need
him.
to have our state's attorneys know that they are the lawyers and the police department know what their function is. With a new police superintendent and a new state's attorney, we have a great opportunity to redefine these roles and protect the community a lot more than they've been up to this point.
Okay, that's what you want to do as state's attorney.
That's exactly what I want to do.
You want to take charge here.
I want to take charge. I want to redo this felony review effort that sends these young assistants out into these police stations, and the line gets blurred between are they super investigators or are they the state's attorney? Are they there to protect the Constitution of Illinois, to protect all the citizens of Illinois from the police and from the criminals? We need to work out that line and clarify it. And if we do that, the good police officers who are out there are going to be protected and are going to feel empowered to do what they do best, keep our communities safe.
Is the new administrative board that was set up to take a more independent look at police brutality allegations, police complaints, is that board sufficiently independent from the mayor?
You know, I don't know, because if I'm the state's attorney, I'm going to be independent of the mayor, and I'm going to supersede the authority of that board. That board is actually meaningless to what I see going on out there.
How, you know, you're at Shefsky and Freilich right now.
Yes.
You're a partner there.
Yes.
Before that, you rented space there.
Yes.
Back in '96, who came out of that law firm? Dick Devine, right?
Devine was there, yes, as a partner, but
When you were there,
I was just a tenant.
Space. Were
Yeah.
you working on his campaign then?
I helped him in '96, yeah.
All right. You supported him along the way?
I've
for
supported Dick
re-election?
Devine all along. Dick Devine is a very fine lawyer and a very good person.
Well, then how independent can you be if you find there are things, as you suggested, there are things that you've said, the office and he should have been doing that they haven't been doing. How independent can you be as state's attorney when he's been somebody who's been a friend who you've been supporting all along the way?
There's a non sequitur to your question.
Well, the short question, he's been a friend of yours.
If I'm the state's attorney, my independence in this whole issue is to determine what has to be done on the day that I take office. Going forward, we're going to get everything done. Going backwards, we'll go wherever the facts lead us. There are no people who have immunity from prosecution.
You don't have to recuse yourself?
I do not have to recuse myself. No, I know. I probably know half the lawyers in the city of Chicago. I can't.
Some
recuse
better
them.
than others, you know.
Well, I know a lot of people better than others, but
Okay.
my job is, if I'm the state's attorney, is to make sure that we are doing what's right to protect people. The independence that I bring to this office is the record I've shown in the 5 years that I've been on the county board. I am not subject to political pressure in that office.
But is this the problem? Look, everybody talks about the coziness in the Chicago way of doing politics. The mayor
I've fought it my whole time since I've been elected.
But the mayor was the state's attorney in '83. He had his first assistant as Dick Devine. Is that why Dick Devine hasn't done what a number of things?
I have
that
no
you
idea.
said?
You'll have to ask Dick Devine that.
Well, I know,
Let me
but
tell you.
you
Here's
see,
the
is that the
interest-
problem?
here's
Now
the
you're
interesting-
gonna be
This is
the
the
guy
first
there.
election since 1948 that we do not have an incumbent state's attorney of one party or the other involved in the election. This is the first time that we really have, as a people, the chance to have a sea change in picking a totally new type of state's attorney. Not the handoff that we've had. It's like a baton. It's like a running match. Adamowski handed to Ward. Ward handed to Stamos. Stamos to Hanrahan.
So here's an opportunity for a break, is what you're saying.
We have to change.
Now you're competing with these other folks for the opportunity to represent the Democratic primary, the Democratic Party in the general election.
Exactly right.
And you know it's likely your opponent will be Tony Perica, one of your colleagues on the Cook
It may or
board.
may not be. I
He
would
may have
welcome
opposition
that.
in the primary.
Yes, he may have opposition. It sounds like he will.
Will he be able to point to you and say, you're not as independent as Tony Perica because
No,
of
he
your
won't.
close
Because
associations?
my judgment is so much better than Tony Perica's. Tony Perica would make the worst state's attorney in the history of this county. His judgment is absolutely flawed. On the county board, there are no original ideas that have come from Tony Perica. He follows us.
What has he done?
He can't make good judgments. He fights the wrong battles all the time on our board. He introduces things that are so outrageous that no one will support. They don't even second them. You cannot.
Sometimes they may be right, just because you can't get a second.
Right.
Maybe everybody else is going along.
He's not right. Tony,
he was right on taxes. You agreed with him on taxes.
No, he agreed with me on taxes. Understand?
Well, the four of you worked together.
He hasn't had an original thought. No, he's shown up at our press conferences. We've never shown up at his press conferences.
Well, but the four of you, let's be fair here.
No,
the four of you as the Gang of Four.
No, the
Claypool,
newspapers call us
Quigley.
the Gang of Four. We are individual people who have taken positions. Quigley, Claypool, and I have taken positions and put together platforms. Perica has joined on with us. We haven't done press conferences with Tony in over 2.5 years because we don't trust his judgment. Tony now, when he does a press conference, follows something we do on his own. I'm going to tell you, Tony Perica, I welcome the opportunity to run against him because we'll be able to show the differences in independence, the differences in experience, and the difference in determining what's fair for this community.
You don't think Democrats who've been part of that party regime for all of these years have a problem in showing their independence to investigate people who are senior Democrats to them?
I don't think it'd be a problem at all.
Perica can say,
I think
Perica doesn't have anything to do with
a good
Devon.
lawyer. A good
Daley.
lawyer is going to look at the facts, is going to study the law, and wherever the facts take us, that's what's going to be done. This office needs to have a prosecutor who is not afraid. There are no sacred cows, and anybody who says there are, it shouldn't be the state's attorney.
Are we allocating resources right in that office? Is
No,
it in terms of
I
drugs, in terms of murder, in terms of rape, in terms of public corruption?
Here's your problem. You're allocating all of your resources under your question to only the criminal side. This office needs to be the office that builds community. Community is the criminal side and the civil side. What we've got to do, there's about 150 distinct communities in this county. Mayor Daley, the other day, I heard him say that within the city of Chicago, he identifies 77 separate communities. Within the suburbs, there's clearly another 70, so I figure there's about 150 distinct communities. The first thing we've got to do is make sure that every one of those communities believes they get treated by the state's attorney's office the same way as any of the others. And what you have to look at is both the civil and the criminal side. The criminal side isn't the most important part of this office. The civil side is an equal partner. We have to begin to look at pollution. We have to begin to look at mortgage scammers, at payday loan scammers. We have to figure out how do we make a community feel better about itself. We're going to go after the gun dealers. We're going to go after the drug dealers. We're going to go after the gangbangers. But we also have got to make sure that we're not just arresting African Americans.
Are the people in Inglewood safer than they were 4 years ago? Is that a legitimate question to ask?
You know, it's a legitimate question. I don't think that they probably are because there's still way too many guns. I've done way too many gun
Is that the
press
problem?
conferences.
Just get the guns and then you're okay?
Well, getting the
How
guns
about the people
is
who
important.
actually use the guns? Do you have to get them too?
Well, we've got to get the guns first because you know what happens? When you have a simple dispute, when we were kids, you might have a fist fight, but now somebody pulls a gun and that shot is fired and somebody dies.
And what happens to that person who pulled
These guns are so prevalent in Inglewood, they're more prevalent than they're going to be in Skokie and Evanston. We have got to get these guns off the street.
What happens to the person who pulls the trigger, kills somebody? What happens to that person?
That person's going to go to jail. And what we have to also do.
How long do they go to jail
Well,
for?
they should go to jail for a long period of time. But here's the other thing that's got to happen. I want to get our state's attorneys out of the courtroom and into classrooms, into grade schools and high schools to let young people understand the consequences of certain behavior. You know, we have kids who watch TV who think that shooting a gun is a normal activity. We've got to stop that. We cannot let that continue.
So the state's attorneys
now
are going
here,
to be
you're
pulled
talking
out of
about Tony
courtrooms,
Pareca.
and they're going to be going out teaching classes?
No, we're not pulling them out of courtrooms. We're putting them into the community to listen to the community, to make their community safer. We're going to try to stop kids from getting into the system, try to stop crime before it happens. We're going to have a zero tolerance on a whole lot of issues. Okay. And we've got to get into these communities. I'm going to put prosecutors, if I'm fortunate enough to get this office, into every community on a regular basis. Not for a community prosecution office, as Dick Devine called it, but I'm going to call it a community advocacy office. I want assistant state's attorneys to understand what people care about, what is bothering them, what is making their neighborhoods unsafe. We'll prosecute the people who commit crimes and we'll put them away, but we'll also communicate in a way that hasn't been done in this county the penalties that they're getting to try and get the deterrence effect that those sentences should have. Right now, nobody knows those sentences exist.
Well, what about the person who is in his or her home? It's in a relatively unsafe area. That person would like a handgun, so if somebody comes barging in, they can protect themselves.
More guns don't solve the problem.
So you're in favor of the Chicago laws as you can't.
I help.
The only person who gets to possess handguns in Chicago would be the Chicago cops and Mayor Daley and his bodyguards, right?
Well,
because they all have guns.
That's an unfair characterization.
Is that fair? What's unfair about it?
The city ordinance allows for law enforcement people to have it. I don't believe that more guns solves the problem. We have to have less guns. I've been studying gun violence for a long time. I've done more on gun violence than anybody running it.
You want to have more gun control laws.
Absolutely.
You would lobby down
I
in
passed
Springfield?
the assault weapons ban with Tony Pareca opposing me on it. I put a referendum on the ballot, which passed overwhelmingly last November, saying we should have an assault weapons law for the state of Illinois. We have got to understand.
To limit the number of gun
we have
purchases?
got to absolutely limit the number of gun purchases.
How much should we? One a year?
I think that one a month is more than adequate.
Would that satisfy you if it were one a month?
Sure, it would, because
you don't want to go any further than that.
No, I wouldn't go any further than that. Okay.
Any other laws you want to change to enhance gun control?
At this point, we should make sure that we're doing all the background checks we can to make sure the mentally ill are not getting guns, and we should be prosecuting to the full extent and the severest penalty anybody who is trying to run guns into our community. The difference between many neighborhoods is the fact that simple interactions become deadly because there's a gun available. We have got to understand the number of people who are being injured and killed by guns.
What about public corruption? Is there a
Public
rule?
corruption has to be looked at. One of the
Has
things
the
that's
state's attorney,
happened.
has the office been doing nothing on public corruption?
Well,
Don Tomczak, Zorich, hired truck, hired tow, hired thief, all of that. Those guys get prosecuted. U.S. attorney.
Well, but you know,
is the state's attorney asleep? Is that
no?
why?
I don't know that they're asleep. I don't know how those prosecutions started because I'm not familiar with the
They've
confidential
done nothing.
memos.
Divine's done nothing in 12 years, has he?
What I'm saying to you is that...
Can you think of anything he's done on public corruption in 12 years?
You know, I do not know because I don't know what he has said to the U.S. attorney. Okay. The one thing I will say to you is I will not defer to the U.S. attorney those kind of cases. There is a role for doing them in the state court system. And let me tell you what the biggest role...
You're saying Divine is at best referring them. And
I have no idea what he's doing.
Maybe they're coming up on
I have
their
no
own.
idea because I'm not part of the office. But let me tell you, one of the reasons I want to make sure we prosecute those as state cases, doing penitentiary time in the state penitentiary system is much harder than in the federal system. And people who have violated the public trust, to me, are one of the greatest crimes against the democracy.
So you want to see that deterrent? You think that deterrent would be
We have
greater?
got to have that deterrent. And I intend to be more aggressive in looking at all of these issues. What I said to you before, we keep putting layers and layers of inspector generals, of panels. Okay. We don't need those if the state's attorney's office is doing its job.
What about somebody who does a multiple murder? What about somebody who does a felony murder and in the course of that felony somebody is murdered? What about somebody who murders
we
people
prosecute those
younger
cases
than 12
very
years
well
old?
now. We prosecute
Well,
those
I'm
cases.
asking you, as a state's attorney, as you know, we have capital punishment as a law, but there's been a moratorium now for 7 years.
Let me tell you
is
on
it
capital
time to
punishment.
lift that moratorium? Is it time to bring back capital punishment?
Well, capital punishment exists. We still do it.
Well, we're not. Nobody's getting executed.
Oh, no. But we are still trying capital cases.
Right.
And we're waiting to see. It's up to the governor. Remember, this is just a decision
right. Would you
of
tell
the
the governor if it's up to you?
I'm going to
Would
tell
say
you one.
that
I'm
you tell the governor you want
opposed.
capital
I'm
punishment?
opposed to the death penalty.
You're
Okay,
opposed to it.
absolutely opposed to the death penalty. But if I were fortunate enough to be elected the state's attorney of Cook County, in those situations where the legislature has said the death penalty would apply, I will study with my staff and make determinations and try many of those cases as death cases. And the one thing I will do is
So
make sure
you'll argue for the death penalty even though you don't believe
even though I'm personally opposed to it, because what I will make sure is that the Illinois Supreme Court won't reverse those cases the way they did all the prior death penalty cases because of mistakes made by the state's attorney's office. And when you look at the record of those cases the Illinois Supreme Court has reversed, it was the state's attorney's office that made those mistakes. What we've got to understand, though, is that every case is not a death penalty case. Those cases have to be selective, and it has to, again, be communicated and brought back to the community.
Have we brought too many death penalty cases over the
I
years?
think we have not used the deterrence effect of these death penalty cases to the community. That's, you say, well, you're taking prosecutors out of the courtroom to get them into the community. I'm getting prosecutors to communicate to the community the quality of the work that they're providing. If we're going to make people safe, and my whole premise as state's attorney will be that the community needs to be safer because of the actions of the state's attorney's office. That's not the way it's been looked at right now. It's been looked at a batting average in a courtroom. How well do we do in convicting
Let me
or
interrupt
not?
to say we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guests. Cook County Commissioner Larry Suffredin, he is running for state's attorney in the Democratic primary, which will be held on February 5th, the year 2008. Thank you so much for coming.
I look forward to coming
I hope
back.
you're coming
We'll
back.
finish this
We'll have
discussion.
we'll
We
have
haven't
some
really
more.
talked about the civil side of the office that much.
Yeah, but before we do, and we'll have to do that the next time, videotape confessions, those are occurring. In capital cases, interrogations, those are occurring.
Absolutely.
And it's working out well?
Right, I think it's working out fine, and we need to expand it. The technology of the state's attorney's office and the police department right now is terrible. We've got to work to get that to be better. These videotape confessions we're actually using kind of first level technology. We should be using higher level technology, and I'm going to work to get
Is
that.
race an issue in this race? It comes up in diversity. It comes up whether the allocation of resources.
Race is an
do
issue.
minority communities get the right level of resources from the state's attorney's office, aside from who they hire?
Well,
On both scores. Race an issue?
Race is an issue in everything in this community, unfortunately. I passed a resolution saying that the state's attorney and the other county offices must reflect the diversity of
What
population
percentage?
and the
Give me a
diversity of
percentage.
people.
What would be the right
I
percentage of
have a
minorities in
plan
your
to bring
office?
minority lawyers back into this office at supervisory levels as soon as I get elected.
What percentage of minorities should you have to say diversity is working?
I need to have at least a fifth of my staff be minorities to feel that
20%?
I'm representing
What is it
the,
now,
the total.
6%?
It's 7% is what they told me in a debate yesterday.
All right. And so you think people in Inglewood and these other areas that are crime prone, they're being represented?
They're getting short shrift.
They are
not getting. They are
They're
not
not
getting.
getting the prosecutions
They're not
they
getting the equal justice that I'm getting here in Evanston or in Niles Township or the places.
Why
I
is it? Has the
represent.
Democratic Party failed them? They've been
It
there
has
for
nothing to do with the Democratic
12
Party.
years,
It
12
has.
years.
It has to do with the way police resources, the court resources, and the state's attorney's office have allocated. It has nothing to do with the Democratic Party. It has that these
Well, it's
public
controlled the office for
these
12
public
years.
offices have failed to adjust and to ensure and give confidence to the people of those communities.
Cook Everett is raising taxes now, including Cook County Board, $800 million.
I'm against them all because we
How
don't need them.
How much of a tax increase do you?
We don't need a tax increase. That's the whole problem.
Nothing. Zero?
We,
Zero
we,
would be right?
we need
You're
some.
telling-
We need some
are you telling
additional.
Todd Stroger that?
Yes, I am. In fact, just before I came here, I told his chief of staff that we need some additional revenues, and there are some revenue
Is
enhancements.
Todd Stroger a mistake as Cook County Board President?
Todd Stroger at this point has certainly not shown the inclination to be a good Cook County Board president, and he needs to
Do you take
wake
some of the
up.
responsibility since you supported
No,
him, didn't
because
you?
I looked at the race and it was between Pareka and Todd.